Hi, I'm Nate with Average Deck Archery Pro Shop and Range here in Phillipsburg, PA, and today we're going to do a down and dirty arrow build, a hunting arrow build, but it applies to everything. Target, FITA, 3D, hunting, whatever you want to do, any diameter of arrow, any spine, whatever. We're going to cover all the bases today. People make arrow builds, in my opinion, in 2025, they make it too complicated. They really, building arrows is very simple. I don't want to oversimplify it. I don't want to make it sound like it's not complicated. It can be if you go a little too far into the weeds, but building an arrow is not that difficult. Today, I'm working with Ultra, the Centrum Premiers in the 246. I like a standard diameter arrow. We'll get into that further. Picking your spine selection and everything, what length to cut them to, insert selection, what should you go with, what should your overall arrow weight be, what should you fletch it with, how you should fletch it. We're going to cover all those bases today, but first, let's start by picking the spine of the arrow. So every manufacturer has a spine chart somewhere, either on their website or like this Ultra Arrow box here, they have it right on the back side of the box. So you buy it at your local pro shop, big box store, whatever. I would recommend supporting your local pro shop. Most of the time they're going to be a little bit more knowledgeable on what arrow you need to pick. This Ultra Arrow box here, it has the spine chart right on it. So you can go by the arrow length that you're going to be shooting, and then you go by the draw weight that you're going to be shooting. I tell people to stick to the arrow length plus or minus 1 inch from their draw length. So I have about a 31-inch draw, so I could shoot up to a 32-inch arrow long or a 30-inch arrow short, plus or minus 1 inch from my draw length. So following a spine chart is very simple. I'm going to go find my arrow length, then I'm going to go find my draw weight, and I'm just going to follow the chart to match that. You can do this online. You can follow the chart on the manufacturer's website. Some even have calculators for you. The Ultra one's very simple. It's color coded. It's very clean. I'm going to shoot a 30-inch arrow. I'm going to go an inch shorter than my draw length, and I'm going to shoot a 70-pound bow. So a lot of the time these go in 5-pound increments. So 65 to 70 or 70 to 75. If you fall in an area that you could be on the cusp between two spines. So let's say, for example, the 28-inch arrow, and you're going to shoot a 70-pound bow. That right there falls on the 350, but right underneath it is the possibility to shoot a 300 spine. I tell people that if you think you're going to shoot anything more than 100 grain point, 125 grain point, maybe you're going to add some brass insert up front, you're going to make it a little bit heavier, to go with the stiffer spine. Drop down to a 300. Out of a compound bow, you can get away with having an arrow that's a little bit on the stiff side. It's really difficult to get a weak arrow. So let's say I'm shooting a 300 spine, following the chart. If I wanted to go down to a 350 or 400 spine, I might get it to work with field points, no problem. But as soon as I put a broadhead, either a fixed blade or a mechanical, but definitely a fixed blade, the arrow is not going to be stiff enough to control the amount of poundage, the amount of force I'm putting into the back end of the arrow. The broadhead will basically turn this arrow into a limp noodle, and it will not give me the consistency I want downrange. So if you're in particular going to be shooting a fixed blade, really try to dial in your spine and make sure it's good. Now, I am not a big heavy arrow person. I'm not even a heavy arrow person, period. So putting a whole bunch of extra weight up front, you really start screwing with the spine chart. There is no hard, fast rule with a spine chart how to say, all right, I have a 28-inch draw, I'm going to put 200 grains up front, I'm going to shoot 70 pounds. There's no real way to actually say you need a 300 spine, a 200 spine, whatever. It kind of gets a little bit more off into the weeds. You're going to have to do some more testing. You're going to have to buy some more arrows. I recommend people stick to a normal arrow, stock insert that comes with the arrow on 100 or 125 grain point. You'll be able to find a broadhead in 100 and 125 grain on my wall every single day of the year. And so you'll be able to build that arrow. And most of those arrows from the normal spine weights of 400 or spine stiffnesses of 400, 350, 340, 300, with 100 grain or 125 grain point is going to weigh between 390 and 470 grains, depending on your build and draw length. That's about where it's going to land. If you run a lighted knock, you're even going to add some more weight in there. Those are plenty. Those arrow weights are plenty out of a 50, 55, 60, 65, 70 pound bow to take any big game in North America. You put a quality fixed blade on the front. I'm a big fan of Magnus broadheads, been shooting those for years. Then you're going to even increase your penetration ability. So I like to stick with standard. I call them bell curve style arrows. It just makes life easy. And when I go into my local pro shop, if they stock that arrow, it's a good chance they're going to have the stock components for it. They're going to have the nocks that I want and the fletching styles that I want. Now, I'm starting out with bare shafts today, but whether you go with bare shafts or pre-fletched, the rules still apply. Nothing changes there. Just the arrows are already fletched for you. I'm going to do a custom 4-fletch today because I like the way it looks. I like the colors I'm selecting, but you can shoot a standard pre-fletched arrow, no problem. Now, picking arrow length. How are you going to cut this arrow? There's 2 ways you can cut it. I chose to cut these Ultra Centrum Premiers by carbon to carbon. It used to be that we would do AMO, which would measure from the deepest part of the groove of the nock to the end of the carbon. The issue is that a lot of people, myself included, like to run different styles of nocks depending on the situation. Lighted nocks, this stock nock from Ultra, maybe you want to throw in a nock from a different manufacturer that fits this diameter. That will change that AMO length because every nock throat, the throat is the depth of the nock as it goes from the end of the nock into the middle of the nock. That will change based on the manufacturer, and that will change your overall arrow length. So it's become more and more common for people to cut them carbon to carbon or end of carbon to end of carbon. I've cut these at 30 inches carbon to carbon already, and they're ready to be inserted and fletched. So again, inserts, and this is where again people get off into the weeds a little bit. I like shooting a standard diameter arrow because there is a bunch of different component options already out there for standard diameter arrows. For Ultra, that's a 246, Gold Tip's a 246, Victory is a 245, Easton's a 244. They're all within a couple thousandths of each other. So you can ultimately get a component that you like, the color, the style, the nock fit as it goes onto the serving, the insert that goes up front. A lot of them are going to cross over. So if you really like a particular insert or nock system, you can get it to fit. That's why I like standard diameter arrows. The next sizes down are a 5mm, also known as a 204, and a 4mm, also known as a 166. Those are where your small diameter and micro diameter, respectively, and they come with their own challenges. The smaller the arrow gets on the inside, the harder it is or impossible it is to get a broadhead or field point to screw in there. Your standard diameter arrow, every field point and broadhead is going to work with that insert. A 5mm arrow is still going to work, but there are certain companies that hide the insert inside, like Easton. They use a hidden insert. Victory uses an outsert sleeve. Gold Tip uses an outsert sleeve, and so does Ultra. It's like a half-out system that screws on. It's really nice, but now it puts extra material up here. Your broadhead might stick out a little bit farther, and they're a little bit tougher to get out of bag targets. A 166 is even worse because you can't fit anything inside of it. Everything is on the outside of the arrow. Now, the smaller you go down in diameter, the less wind drift you get, the greater penetration you get because there's less surface area. I've been hunting with standard diameter arrows for, oh gosh, this season will be my 22nd year bow hunting. Wow, I'm getting old. My 22nd year bow hunting, and I've almost hunted exclusively with standard diameter arrows. Pass-throughs are not a problem. I shot 60 pounds for years, so it's not like I have this massive kinetic energy dump. Sure, I do have a long draw length at 31 inches or more, but even still, I sell a ton of arrows to people that are shooting a standard diameter, stock insert, 100 grain point, and they've never come back to me and complained about penetration if their bow is set up correctly. So the stock insert that comes from Ultra is just your standard, anywhere between a 10 and a 15 grain aluminum insert. This is very common for the industry. You can, like I said, you can switch up to a different insert from a different manufacturer if you would like. Ultra also has the option to go with a heavy insert. Haven't even opened this package yet because I don't plan on using them. But a lot of people have wanted to throw a little bit of extra weight up there, and so this is a heavier style brass insert. Some of them use a larger aluminum, some of them use stainless steel, some of them use the motorcycles that are ripping down the street in front of my store. I don't know if you caught that on the microphone or not. But what I like about the Ultra components is that they are exactly the same. They're the same size, they're the same construction. Sometimes you get ones that are a little bit longer, sometimes it throws off. Some people get into the weeds on how it affects the spine or not. I don't think it does, but I like having components that look the same and react the same when I go to glue them in. Now, how you choose to put the insert in the front of your arrow is totally up to you. You can use a super glue type, fast setting, gel, or kind of the watery stuff like Loctite. You can use a 2-part epoxy. That would give you probably the longest cure time, but also the strongest bond. But however, I use good old-fashioned hot melt. Now, I don't use the type of hot melt sticks that come from your craft craft store, they are very clear. There's not a whole lot of rosin into it. It's not very sticky. That type of hot melt is meant to fuse two things together. We're not fusing this aluminum to this carbon. That would actually damage the carbon. What we want is we want a high rosin content, very flexible, and when it cures and when it cools, it turns into a very sticky, very flexible material. That's what this stuff is. Now you can use like Bohning ferrule type. I use the OMP type glue here, and I hand cut and insert every single arrow that comes out of my store with hot melt. It's kind of an old school technique, but I don't get inserts that pull out. And even more importantly, if you're going to set up a target arrow and you want to change out point weights, once you put them in with epoxy or a super glue type thing, it's not easy to get out, if easy to get out at all, or even impossible to get out. Whereas hot melt, all you have to do is reheat the point and insert. It'll soften the glue on the inside. You can pull it out and you can change things out the way you want them to be. So this is a little $10 denatured alcohol burner off of Amazon. I'll link it in the description below. It's very simple. I'm going to take my needle nose pliers here. You don't want this, you don't need this to be super hot. This has a very, very low melting point. The stuff that you get that's specific for archery needs is going to have a very low melting point, whereas the stuff that comes from your craft store or whatever, Walmart, it's going to be very high temperature because again, it's trying to melt and fuse paper to styrofoam or something like that. So I'm just going to heat up the insert here. Again, just a few seconds, and then I'm going to get my glue hot. You talk to anybody who's been doing this long enough, they're all going to have different various opinions on how this works. I'm going to put a big old booger of glue on here, just kind of reheat it up, tip it into the insert, and I'm going to spin the arrow around the insert as I insert it to get all that glue, push it on the rest of the way, and that's inserted. Now if you get this too hot, you'll be able to feel it through the carbon. It's maybe lukewarm at best. That's a perfect bond. If you do this and you can feel the heat coming through the carbon, you know you've been holding it in the heat too long. Now, you can choose to leave this cool and then pick it off later. I'll just give it a little splash of heat and then wipe it off on my finger. Again, not for the faint of heart. I have psoriasis in my left hand, so I've lost a lot of tension or nerve ending and feeling. So often I'll end up just wiping it off on my palm, and I'll have a big patch of glue here. And when I'm done inserting, I'll just peel it all off. But that's one arrow inserted, and it's ready to go. There's no curing time. There's no wait time. I can get a dozen arrows here if I'm not talking to the camera. I can get this done in a matter of just a few minutes. And then they are immediately ready to be fletched, and then they're immediately, pretty much after that, ready to be shot as soon as that glue dries. Now, if you think the arrow weight and the spine selection and everything really sends people off into the weeds, ask them how they want their arrows fletched, and you will really be in for a whirlwind. Everybody likes their arrows fletched their particular way, their particular color figuration. Do you want to run wraps on the arrow? I used to run wraps on a lot of my arrows. It made it easier. I could pull the knockout and dunk it into really hot or almost boiling water. It would loosen up the glue and I could take the wrap and peel the whole thing off. It made cleaning the arrow a lot easier. But then I just learned over time that I didn't want the extra weight on the back end of my arrow. It didn't really help with seeing the arrow because the arrow is flying directly away from you. You can't see the wrap at that point. You're just seeing the fletchings. And so I just started gluing them directly to the shaft. Your most common, if you buy, like for example, this is the Ultra Novum 246, it's going to have a 3-fletch, high-profile blazer type vane. These are from Q2i, but everybody makes a 2-inch type of profile blazer type vane. It's going to come stock out of the factory with a 1 to 2 degree offset, and that's very normal, very typical for any manufacturer that I might sell here in my store. The blazer type vane, the high-profile type vane, gets it done. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a clean thing. It's easy to fletch. It's only 2 inches long, so working in a jig like the Spitzenberger or a tower jig like the Bohning or a Grayling jig, they're really easy to work with. There's no prep required. You literally just put a little bit of glue on there, stick them on, and they're on in about 15 seconds. You can pull the clamp off and get on to the next fletching or the next arrow. This is by far my most preferred method, is a 3-fletch blazer style vane. Now, some people feel that they want to get a better look or a different look, and so they'll go with something like these Q2i vanes here, which are in a shield cut. Now, the actual cut of the vane, in my opinion, has nothing to do with the actual flight performance of the arrow. I think the length of the vane, the height of the vane, that has the actual what's going on with the arrow in terms of its control. Now, this is a a 27 diameter Ultra. This is the Centrum Limited, and I've been shooting this indoor spots and for 3D down at Foley in Alabama there for the first leg of the ASA, their whole national tour. And this arrow is doing great. I like the 4-fletch. I get more stability out of it. The issue with running a 4-fletch is A, you're using extra vanes, but B, also you have a little bit less tolerance in terms of vanes being close to each other. If you've never 4-fletched before, I know it sounds like there's 3-fletch and just adding another vane, but if you're really starting out fletching for the first time, start with a 3-fletch and see how you do, okay? It's a real big bummer when you get a whole bunch of 4-fletch arrows done and 2 are closer together, the one's kind of off. Aesthetically, it bothers you. I don't think it would really bother in terms of performance, but I get a lot more drag out of this arrow. I get a lot more spin rate out of this arrow, and so I'm choosing to go with a low profile green Q2i, and I'm gonna put these in a left helical on my hunting arrows. Oh boy, we just opened up a whole nother can of worms. Left helical, right helical, left offset, right offset. Let's simplify it. Footballs, basketballs, baseballs, any kind of sport event where something has to fly through the air, you want to impart spin. Right, a knuckleball is not spinning and it has this really weird trajectory to it. Any ball that's going to fly through the air in a sport needs to spin for it to fly accurately. The same thing's true of your arrow. The more spin, the more rotation it gets, the quicker it will stabilize, and the easier it'll stabilize, the more fletching you add to the back end, like a big high profile feather, for example, or a really big 4-fletch. It will stabilize faster. However, if you're going to shoot long distance, think total archery challenge distances, 70, 80, 90, 100 yards or more, you're going to actually want to run less vane because you don't want it spinning so much that it slows down at a particular distance. And what will happen is you get what's called the parachuting effect. This will slow down so much because of all the resistance back here that the back end will actually start controlling the arrow more than the front end, and you'll start getting this what we call parachuting effect downrange. Now, for a hunting setup, whitetails, I'm in the Northeast here in Pennsylvania, but even in the Midwest, your shots are mostly 40 and in, sometimes 30 or 20 and in, and you're not going to have a parachuting effect. So if you plan on just hunting, fletch whatever you want. Feathers, high profile, low profile, 3-fletch, 4-fletch, 1 degree of offset, 2 degree of offset, 3 degree of offset, or helical. What helical is doing, and it can be represented on this clamp here, helical puts an actual twist. So you notice that this is not a straight line. It's actually kind of got a little bit of a curl to it, and that's what a helical clamp does. A helical puts that curl into it, so that way it kind of wraps around the shaft a little bit more. We really have to use a helical style fletch with feathers because feathers are usually longer and they also have their natural curve to them because they came off the wings of a bird after all. So we often have to use a helical. The shorter the vane, the less the helical plays into effect. So if you're going to shoot really short vanes, don't worry about a helical too much. You're going to shoot a 2.5, 3.5 inch vane or longer with a feather, you're going to want a helical jig. Now the Bitzenberger jig has been around for forever and a day. It has the ability to do a 120 degree, which that's split into thirds, right? 360 degrees split into thirds, so that's a 3-fletch. The 90 degree, which is 360 degrees of the arrow split into fourths, so I'm going to do a 4-fletch. And then it also has to do with a very old school technique of making it kind of like an X-wing from Star Wars, which I don't even remember what the numbers are on it. Yeah, 75 and 105. I don't know of anybody that shoots that anymore. I think it's an old trad school kind of thing. But I've got it set tiered so it does the 90, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 clicks around, and I have my jig set up at the exact angle that I want, so that way it works with this standard diameter ultra arrow here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in, and since all carbon arrows have the ability to spin the nock, it doesn't really matter where you start. The ultra arrows use a spineless technology, so that way there's no real stiff or weak side of the arrow in the spine. It makes tuning a lot easier. Some arrow companies put the stiff side of the spine on the shaft, and you might want to pay attention to that when you go to fletch. I don't really pay much attention to it anymore. I just kind of fletch them up as I go. Man, there's a lot of motorcycles going down Front Street today. Big old diesel truck. So I'm using Q2i, the low profile. These are the X2s in a 2.1, so that's why I'm going to run 4-fletch, because I don't think a 3-fletch will be able to handle a fixed blade broadhead. Now I know the distance that I have set. I got a Sharpie mark here on my jig clamp, so that way I know exactly where I want this vane to be sitting. And I always do a dry run when I go to test out a new diameter arrow or something, just to make sure that everything's going to fit. I'm getting good contact at the front, the middle, and back of the vane. And so I kind of take a look at it here in the light, and I see that everything's looking really good. So I know that I'm ready to go with this arrow and this vane configuration. Primer pens, depending on the fletch that you're using. So AAE, obviously all of the tack vanes, some other brands of vanes require a primer pen. Now, a primer pen is basically using an acetone-like material to clean the base of the vane, and it activates the vane and allows it to stick on with the right glue that you're going to use. You don't have to primer most vanes. I find though sometimes with Q2Is have a two-part vane, so the base is a black, different type of polymer, and then the vane that's the colorized portion is different. Blazer vanes are all the same. I'm trying to think, the old Vane Tech, most of the Vane Techs are all the same. They don't need primed. Most of the Bohning stuff that makes blazers, they're all fine. All your tacks though, they do need primed. I find I just get better adhesion rate when I prime stuff. So I just like to and it doesn't take much. I'm not pushing hard. I'm just a little bit of a swipe here. And by the time I'm done putting this cap back on, that acetone type liquid has already flashed off. It's ready to go. You can use any kind of glue that you want. Any type of fast setting super glue is a really good idea. This is just literally glue from Harbor Freight. It's dirt cheap, super liquidy though, so you got to be careful. I literally I don't even squeeze it. I just kind of push it here and I just get a few dots going. And that's all the more I need. I'll end up actually taking my finger. A lot of people like using the end of a toothpick to smear the glue up and down the vane and then press it onto the jig. A little dab goes a long way. What I have here underneath my jig is a mouse pad. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push it down against the base of the jig and then I'm gonna rock it forward. Couple seconds of firm pressure here, nothing too extreme. I don't want to squish all the glue out so that way it runs all over the place. Again, I'm just checking to make sure that I have good contact. Everything's looking really good there, zero complaints. So I'm going to give it a few seconds here. I don't need to blow on it or anything. This is really now just the tedious part. All the hard work's done. This is now the easiest part. Just give it a few seconds here. What I do like to do is I take my hand, push down. You could screw this jig, you could drill some holes through it and screw down to a board or something, but I like to push it down. And then when I squeeze this clamp, I'm gonna open it and then lift up. So it's a two-part process. There's one, and then there's two. You notice I had some glue there stuck to the other side of the vane. I used too much. So I gotta make sure that I wipe that off. I have a really dull paring knife here I use the back of to kind of scrape any extra glue off that I might have gotten stuck. Put this back in correctly. I'm going to rotate it around. Everything looks really good adhesion. It's ready for the next flet. Sometimes, like, I love having this mouse pad here because then I could do this just about anywhere on my bench. This is a carpeted top. I don't want to get glue everywhere. Just make sure I got that acetone-like material coming out. One swipe's all I need. Put the cap back on. Grab my glue. Again, I'm not even squeezing this. And if you ask 10 different archers their favorite fletching glue, you will get 10 different answers. I fletch a bunch of arrows for people, and glue, you would be surprised, is actually quite expensive, and particularly in today's current financial market. So I decided, I'm going to try this Harbor Freight stuff out because it's like $2 a bottle and there's a bunch in there. The only caveat is that it's very runny. I traditionally like a gel kind of glue. I used Gorilla Glue green cap gel for a long time. A lot of people like the blue cap Loctite. I started using Fletching specific glue, like the tack glue. That's a really good glue. You can use that on any vane, not just tacks. The OMP Stuck from October Mountain Products, the Gold Tip Grip, all those are really good vane fletching glues. Fletchite Platinum, I use this exclusively now on feathers only because it has such a long cure time. It's 5 minutes per vane in the clamp. So this arrow here with a 4-fletch would take 20 minutes. That's too long. So I use this only on feathers and then the tip and tail when I'm done, which I'll show you in a minute. Yeah, this is just the slow and steady, tediously horrible part. There are a lot of people that really enjoy fletching arrows. I used to kind of like it. I'm not one for like tedious, monotonous work like this. I kind of feel like I got to get up and move and do stuff. But there are a lot of guys that really enjoy this part of the process, and it is cool. Like, right now I'm fletching these arrows for this video, but these are going to be my hunting arrows, right? So part of it's like, here we are, late March. A lot of people are obviously doing 3D, myself included, but just to know that I could be sending this at a buck in Pennsylvania or Ohio later this October, November, that does kind of feel pretty cool. I already feel like I've been sitting here for 2 hours and I'm only 3 fletchings into 4 on one arrow. I got 11 to go. If you use a jig like a Bitzenberger, always want to put your clamp, or they sell a plate that comes with it too, back on the jig so the magnets stay strong. Just a little pro tip there. This looks really good. I'll take my pinky finger if I see a little bit of excess glue, just kind of wipe it off so it looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But that is a 4-fletched, beautiful little ultra arrow. It doesn't look like a whole lot of fletching on there, but you get that much steerage on the back end, it's actually going to turn out, I think, really, really nice. We'll find out when I go to Broadhead tune later on this year. I'm going to put 125 grain field point in because that's the broadhead weight that I shoot. I'm going to tip and tail this arrow, which is the active. You don't have to do this step. I've done it though for, well, 20 years, I guess, and I've always appreciated it. I take the Fletch-type platinum and you tip with Fletch-type. You don't have to squeeze a whole lot. Glue will just start going everywhere. So I just keep giving a little bit of attention until I start seeing the glue flow. And eventually it'll just kind of like siphon itself out a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little dab of glue right here at the front end of the vane. Again, not squeezing hard, just a little tip of glue just to cover up those little front fins. And I do this on every arrow that comes out of my store that I custom fletch. Mine, customers, friends, whatever. And that's it. That just keeps that vane from lifting. You shove it into a bag target, passes through a deer, whatever. Just let that cure, and that'll just kind of solidify that front end. Fletch-type, it's a very rubbery, very flexible glue once it cures, and so that gives a little bit of give in the front and back end of the fletching. So I don't know, I've just done it for so long, I just keep doing it. You could use the regular super glue, but sometimes the super glue gets frosty. When it dries, it kind of leaves like a white residue on the front, and then it just looks gross. So I always use Fletch-type for this part. Let's weigh this arrow. So I got 125 grain point. I know I'm going to run a lighted knock. I know this knock weighs 10 grains. I know a lighted knock weighs 24. So obviously I won't run both knocks at the same time. So whatever this arrow is, I'll take the 10 grain knock out, put a 24 in. So whatever this number is, I'm just going to add 14 grains. It feels really good. Yeah, so right now that is coming out to 400, let's say 67. If it would stop rolling, fine. 467.2. So put 14 grains in there. This arrow is at 481. For me, that is pretty normal. I've usually shot between 450 and 490. That's usually where I live. 481, this arrow is going to be cooking out of my bow. I'll bet you my Elite Exalt LD is going to be pushing this. If I had to wager, it's going to be around 285 feet a second, which is plenty fast for a whitetail or out west rig, wherever you want to take it. And that is going to be a phenomenal arrow, and I cannot wait to send this through a whitetail this fall. But anyways, that's all for this video. A little down and dirty arrow build from start to finish. If you have any questions on anything that I talked about today, spine selection, arrow length, point weight, overall weight, or any questions you have about arrows like this Ultra that I'm working with here, feel free to drop it down in the comments section below. You're always welcome to stop in here at the store if you're in Central PA, 21 North Front Street in Phillipsburg, PA, Average Check Archery Pro Shop and Range. You can always email me at averagecheckarchery@gmail.com, and don't forget us to find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery hunting if you so choose. Definitely enjoy God's beautiful creation, and we'll get to see you next time.